Russia's mighty Black Sea Fleet, once feared as the steel fist of Putin's empire, is now being hunted by drones, costing less than $100,000. In a single night attack deep inside Novorossiysk harbor, Ukrainian naval drone swarms slipped past multi-million-dollar Russian defenses, setting warships ablaze and turning one of Moscow's safest naval bases into chaos. The $500 million frigate Admiral Essen, armed with caliber cruise missiles and crewed by over 200 sailors, was struck again for the fourth humiliating time. Simultaneously, over 1.2 million tons of Russian fuel reserves erupted into massive fireballs, while air defense systems worth tens of millions were shredded in seconds. This is no longer traditional naval warfare, it's the collapse of the age of the invincible fleet. The Black Sea Fleet was once the steel fist of Russian power in the region. It was not merely a naval force, it was a symbol of imperial dominance, a tool Moscow used to control the entire Black Sea and keep southern Ukraine under constant threat. With dozens of modern warships, including destroyers and frigates armed with caliber cruise missiles, the fleet could strike targets hundreds of kilometers away with devastating precision. From the naval base in Sevastopol, gray-hulled warships patrolled the waters, controlling vital shipping lanes, choking Ukraine's ports, and turning the Black Sea into Russia's private lake. In the early stages of the war, Ukrainian forces barely dared to challenge it. The fleet's presence paralyzed maritime trade for Ukraine and made any large-scale amphibious operation toward Odessa seem not only possible, but inevitable. To many observers, the Black Sea Fleet appeared nearly invincible. Among its most formidable vessels stood the Admiral Essen, a Project 11356M Admiral Grigorovich-class frigate. The ship measured over 124 meters in length. It was equipped with advanced radar systems, Still-1 air defense missiles, and crucially 8 vertical launch tubes for caliber cruise missiles weapons capable of changing the course of a war. With a top speed of 30 knots and a crew of more than 200 highly trained sailors, the Admiral Essen was valued at approximately $500 million. It was the pride of the Russian Navy, sleek, heavily armed, and built for modern naval warfare. The ship represented everything Russia believed about its own superiority at sea: advanced technology, overwhelming firepower, and unchallenged dominance. Yet Russia had grown dangerously confident in its traditional strengths. Commanders believed the port of Novorossiysk, their backup naval base, was safely tucked away and well protected. Warships could anchor there with relative security. No one in the Russian high command imagined that enemy drones could penetrate so deep into their territory to strike at the heart of their fleet. But modern warfare was changing faster than Russia could adapt. At the beginning of 2022, Ukraine's navy was almost non-existent. Most of its few remaining warships had been destroyed, captured, or rendered inoperable during the early days of the Russian invasion. What little remained could not hope to challenge the might of the Black Sea Fleet. While Russia prowled the waters with powerful frigates and missile ships, Ukraine had no destroyers, no submarines, and no meaningful surface fleet. In a traditional naval war, Ukraine would have already lost. It lacked the luxury of matching Russia ship for ship or engaging in conventional fleet battles. But this weakness forced Ukraine to think differently. With its back against the wall, the country had no choice but to innovate or perish. Instead of trying to rebuild a conventional navy, Ukraine changed the rules of the game entirely. It created a new kind of fleet, one made of cheap, unmanned naval drones. These small, fast, low-cost attack boats were equipped with powerful explosive warheads and operated remotely from hundreds of kilometers away. Using swarm tactics, Ukraine sent groups of drones racing across the waves to hunt Russian warships. What these drones lacked in armor and size, they made up for in surprise, agility, and sheer numbers. A single drone could cost less than $100,000, while the Russian ships they targeted were worth hundreds of millions. This was asymmetric warfare at its most brilliant, turning the sea into a hunting ground where the hunter could be anyone, anywhere. The psychological impact was immediate and devastating. Russian warships began clustering together for protection, rarely venturing far from the safety of their ports. Patrols decreased, The once dominant Black Sea Fleet grew cautious, even fearful of invisible threats beneath the waves. The Black Sea Fleet still existed, but increasingly, it no longer controlled the sea. The Black Sea was ink black under a moonless sky. In the port of Novorossiysk, harbor lights cast long, trembling reflections across the calm water. Russian warships sat motionless at their berths like sleeping giants. Radar antennas turned slowly. On deck, sailors stood watch, their breath visible in the cool night air. The frigate, M2M radars, swept the horizon. Electronic warfare systems hummed. Everything felt secure. After all, this was deep inside Russian territory, far from the front lines. The Black Sea Fleet had retreated here for safety. No one expected trouble tonight. But trouble was already coming. Far out at sea, a silent swarm cut through the waves. Operators from Ukraine's elite unmanned units, the Kairos Battalion, the Nemesis Brigade, and the 414th Brigade Magyar's birds, sat in darkened control rooms hundreds of kilometers away, eyes locked on glowing screens. Their fingers danced across controls with cold precision. These were not ordinary drone pilots. They were naval hunters, masters of asymmetric warfare. This was not a random attack. It was a coordinated naval hunt. The first drones appeared as faint blips on Russian radar. "Contact! Low and fast!" a voice crackled over the radio. Confusion spread instantly. Russian operators activated the KT-216 electronic warfare systems, flooding the air with jamming signals. AK-630 close-in weapon systems whirred to life, their six-barreled guns searching for targets. Missile defenses lit up the night with streaks of fire. But the drones kept coming. They skimmed the waves at high speed, dodging, weaving, exploiting every blind spot. One drone exploded midair, torn apart by defensive fire. Then another. Too late. The first impact slammed into a Russian vessel with a thunderous roar. A fireball bloomed, lighting up the harbor. Alarms screamed across the base. Seconds later, a second strike hit, this time closer to the Admiral Essen. Thick black smoke poured into the sky. Sailors scrambled across decks as flames licked at the superstructure. More drones followed in relentless waves. Explosions echoed across the water. The once quiet port descended into chaos. Russia's layered defenses, radar, jamming, guns, missiles, had all failed. For the Admiral Essen, this was humiliation number 4. The proud frigate, once a symbol of Russian naval dominance, had already been struck by Ukrainian Neptune missiles in 2022. In March 2026, drones damaged its central superstructure and radar arrays. April brought critical hits that crippled its Caliber launch capability. Now, in May, it was burning again at the pier. What was once feared was now pitied a recurring victim, repeatedly hunted in the very port Russia believed was safe. The ship that carried Moscow's pride had become a magnet for Ukrainian drones. The Admiral Essen was no longer feared. It was being hunted. If Ukraine can cripple warships like this without a major navy, what does the future of naval warfare even look like? The Russian warships were equipped with some of the most advanced defense systems in the world. The frigate, M2M radars, scanned the skies and sea surface for threats. Electronic warfare suites like the KT-216 were designed to jam enemy signals and blind incoming missiles. AK-630 Gatling guns could spit out thousands of rounds per minute, while layered anti-air missile systems promised to create an impenetrable shield around the fleet. These ships were built to survive high-intensity missile duels against peer adversaries. Their armor and sensors had been tested and trusted for decades. In theory, nothing should have gotten close enough to cause serious damage. But they were never designed for what Ukraine brought to the fight. Ukraine didn't play by the old rules. Instead of sending expensive missiles that could be tracked and intercepted, they unleashed swarms of small, low-cost naval drones. These unmanned boats skimmed just above the water at high speed, presenting almost no radar signature. Flying at wave-top level, they stayed under the radar horizon for far longer than traditional threats. A single drone cost a fraction of the multi-million-dollar defense systems trying to stop it. When 10 or 20 drones attacked at once, the math broke down. Russian operators found themselves overwhelmed, jamming one group only left others free to strike. Guns that were deadly against aircraft struggled to track fast, agile surface targets weaving between waves. This was the brutal reality of asymmetric warfare. Billion-ruble defenses were being humiliated by drones that Ukraine could produce by the dozens at low cost. One well-placed explosive warhead from a cheap drone could disable sensors worth far more than the entire attacking force. The psychological blow was even worse than the physical damage. Russian sailors began losing confidence in their equipment and command. Warships that once ruled the Black Sea now spent most of their time hiding in port, engines cold, crews on edge. Every shadow on the water, every faint blip on radar triggered panic. Fear had replaced dominance. And the disaster was only getting bigger. While flames raged in Novorossiysk harbor, the nightmare spread far beyond the water. Ukraine had orchestrated a symphony of destruction across multiple targets simultaneously. At the Grushova fuel storage facility, the sky suddenly turned orange. Massive fireballs erupted as Ukrainian sea drones and loitering munitions slammed into the giant tanks. Over 1.2 million tons of oil and refined fuel became an uncontrollable inferno. Thick columns of black smoke rose hundreds of meters into the night, visible from dozens of kilometers away. The intense heat warped metal structures and sent rivers of burning fuel flowing across the facility. What was supposed to be a strategic reserve for the Black Sea Fleet was now lighting up the Russian coastline like a funeral pyre. Simultaneously, Ukrainian strikes destroyed several OSA air defense systems guarding the area. Each system, valued at around $10 million, was reduced to twisted scrap in seconds. The loss didn't just remove expensive hardware, it punched holes in Russia's integrated air defense network, leaving the region even more vulnerable to follow-up attacks. The assault didn't stop at the coast. Deep inland, Ukrainian drones hit a command headquarters controlling drone operations in Kherson. Fuel trucks exploded in chain reactions, lighting up vehicle depots. Armored vehicles parked in neat rows were shredded by precise strikes. At the Rovenki logistics base, critical supply warehouses went up in flames, destroying ammunition and spare parts desperately needed for the front. Russia wasn't just losing warships, it was losing the ability to sustain them. This coordinated barrage was devastating on a deeper level. By hitting naval assets, fuel depots, air defenses, and logistics hubs in one night, Ukraine deliberately overloaded Russia's repair and resupply systems. Every strike forced Moscow to spend millions more on emergency fixes, diverting resources from other battlefronts. The constant pressure created systemic exhaustion, wearing down not just equipment, but morale, budgets, and command capacity. This was no longer a tactical raid. It was economic and strategic attrition. Do massive warships still make sense in the drone age? Or are we watching the collapse of traditional naval power in real time? Ukraine did not win at sea through superior size, greater wealth, or a larger fleet. In fact, it possessed almost none of those advantages. What Ukraine possessed instead was something far more dangerous: the ability to adapt, innovate, and move faster than its enemy. While Russia relied on expensive, decades-old warships and traditional naval doctrine, Ukraine built an entirely new model of warfare from scratch. Using cheap, expendable, and highly intelligent systems, they turned the Black Sea into a proving ground for 21st-century conflict. Russia has been dragged into a war of attrition it cannot afford to win. Every damaged warship requires months of expensive repairs in shipyards already struggling under sanctions. Every drone strike forces Moscow to burn through limited resources, fuel, ammunition, and manpower just to maintain a presence at sea. The psychological toll is equally heavy. Russian sailors now operate under constant fear, knowing that any movement outside protected harbors could end in another fiery humiliation. The once proud Black Sea Fleet is no longer projecting power. It is simply trying to survive. Ukraine has achieved something remarkable. It now controls the battle space of the Black Sea without a traditional navy. Through a sophisticated network of aerial reconnaissance drones, naval strike drones, and advanced targeting systems, Ukrainian forces can detect, track, and engage Russian vessels across vast distances. They don't need aircraft carriers or destroyers. They only need speed, surprise, and precision. The sea has become a domain where the smaller, smarter force dictates the terms of engagement. Russia still had warships, but Ukraine increasingly controlled the battle space. As Major Magar, commander of the 414th Brigade, later reflected, "We don't need to match their ships. We only need to make every single one of them afraid to sail." In this new war, courage and creativity beat steel and tradition. The age of the invincible fleet is over. Ukraine did not defeat the Black Sea Fleet with numbers, money, or traditional power. It won through raw innovation, relentless asymmetric thinking, and the fearless use of drone warfare. Forced into a corner with almost no navy, Ukraine rewrote the script. What began as desperate survival tactics evolved into a masterclass in modern conflict, proving that creativity and adaptability can humble even the mightiest military machine. The implications stretch far beyond the Black Sea. Giant, expensive warships, once symbols of national strength, are now dangerously vulnerable in the age of cheap, intelligent drone swarms. The future belongs to agile, low-cost drone fleets that can overwhelm traditional defenses through sheer numbers and unpredictability. NATO is quietly studying every strike. China is watching even more closely, rethinking its own massive naval ambitions in the Pacific. The era of the invincible fleet is fading. The Black Sea Fleet was built to dominate the sea. Instead, it became the battlefield where the future of naval warfare was rewritten. What do you think are massive warships becoming obsolete in the drone age? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you want more deep dives into how technology is reshaping global conflicts, subscribe and hit the bell. Next, we'll explore how this same revolution is changing the war in the air.